EPL Season 2, Week 2. Stanley Winston with the NWC versus Forjustice with the Nilla Ninjas, the NN. Japanese mirror. This isn't something I see every day. Usually if someone picks Japan, you try to counter it with something else, but for the first match, the players decide the civs together. They'll agree on a civ matchup, and when they do, that's what they stick with. So looks like this is what we're gonna stick with. Get the overlays just right, and then we'll take a look at the map, making sure that it's a solid map for everything. Alright, so taking a look at the map, it is pretty solid. This is one, yeah, okay, pretty similar, very similar actually. The mines are pretty good, very fair, the hunts are very fair. Good map generation. We have Blue, who sent out both of his heroes from to each side, and Japan sending them both to one side pretty much. I don't know. Splitting up your heroes does allow you to get a lot more map vision sooner, but having the heroes together allows you to take treasures faster. Also, if you run into the enemy heroes, you're gonna be able to fight them a little bit easier. We have a 95 wood treasure being picked up by Stanley Winston, and a 90 food treasure picked up by Forjustice. 95 wood is really nice, especially for Japan. You'll be able to get some shrines out sooner. We have a shrine coming down. It's a Portuguese consulate from Forjustice and from Stanley Winston. Pretty mirror matchup there, or pretty mirror decision making there. I was wondering if we were going to see some Yamabushi, but it's probably going to be Ashi chosen to try to take care of shrines, at least by one player. You're probably not going to go Portuguese and then go back into Japanese consulate a bit later. It's a kind of a bit of XP wasted if you do that. Yeah, getting into it. Looks like we're got a good game going here. Japan mirror, Forjustice, Stanley Winston. If you guys need me to change any of the audio settings or overlays, go ahead and let me know. Let me change this to 0. That is from the previous game. It is 0 to 0. There we go. 0 to 0. We have a shrine coming out from Stanley Winston. That is his second shrine, and despite Forjustice picking up the wood, no, he didn't pick up the wood treasure. It was Stanley Winston that picked up the wood treasure. He picked up the food. So we see Forjustice aging a little bit sooner, but Stanley Winston getting a shrine out a little bit sooner himself. He's getting ready to plop some shrines down. Picked up a 40 XP treasure for Stanley Winston. We take a look at the treasures here. We've got Forjustice picking up 80 coin, 90 food, 70 food. That's pretty good. On the other hand, we have 95 wood, 40 coin, War Dog, and 40 XP. Pretty even all in all. The food bonus from Forjustice means he's definitely going to be aging sooner, but Stanley got some XP and some wood in there, so really good for him too. Pretty even. I wouldn't really complain if I was in either player's position there. Looks like we have 3 shrines going from Forjustice. As expected, a Toshugo shrine from each player. They each have 1 villager building it. That's going to make the age up time be 10 seconds less for having 1 villager on. We have a 4th shrine coming up from Forjustice. And looking at Stanley Winston, he's got his 5th coming up. Fifth coming, it's very close. Just trying to spam the shrines out. If you're able to get a little bit more shrines out than your opponent, it could be pretty big because there's only so many hunts on the map. And there's only so many shrines that can be built on animals. So being able to get them all out can be pretty nice. We do have Stanley Winston kind of spreading his shrines out a bit more, getting them closer to the enemy, and Forjustice is mostly a little bit closer. Pretty mirror match so far. Take a look at the decks real quick. Are they mirror decks? Almost mirror decks. We have 2 villagers, and we have Mountain Warrior here for Justice and the food silos, and over here we just have the 2 villagers. It's actually not mirror decks at all. Stanley Winston has a lot more Age 3 military shipments. It looks like Forjustice has a little bit of a later game deck, and Stanley Winston isn't expecting it to go that far, which would be a fair assumption in most times that you're going to be playing 1v1, but with the Japanese mirror it could go late. We'll see what happens there. Take a look at the treasures again. Nothing picked up. Players are just focusing on building the shrines. We do have a 2 sheep treasure that could be somewhat useful. The native warrior is actually pretty decent. Could do some good sieging. Not that no XP or resource treasures left on the map. Looking at the shrines that have come out, it's still very similar. 140 population for Justice, meaning he has 13 shrines, and we have 130 from Stanley Winston, meaning he has 12 shrines currently, at 13 now. Looking at it, it's looking good. Got a couple more shrines coming in the back from Forjustice. He saved his hunts behind his TC or close to his TC to shrine later. That was probably a really good choice. We got a couple that can be shrined here from Stanley Winston. We are currently on basically 17 shrines versus 14. So definitely in favor of Forjustice a little bit. Looking at the economy, you can see that those shrines do make a difference. We can look at the villagers. We got a market already out, and we have the second Age 2 food gathering bonus, and also I believe that's just the Age 1 coin gathering bonus. Same thing from Stanley Winston. He is getting the upgrade that allows you, it gives your villagers gathering from all natural resources 5% faster. Got it going on here. Got a shrine that looks like Stanley Winston is trying to put up. I wonder if Forjustice is going to try to put it up in the same spot, or if he's just scouting and seeing what the opponent's doing. We have 18 shrines from Forjustice and 15 from Stanley, so Forjustice has done a little bit better with that. Yeah, the hero is indeed just scouting. Have a few shrines coming out, a few Ashy coming out, trying to put some pressure on the shrines. On the opposite side, we have also Ashy. We can look at the military units, seeing 16 Ashy and 7 Bastiros from Forjustice. That's going to be the Bastiros are the expo that you get from the consulate. On the other hand, we have 8 Ashy and 7 Bastiros, so a little bit more investment from Forjustice. Looking at the resources, it does reflect that he has invested a little bit more in army. If they fight, it could be a little bit bad, but I don't expect Stanley Winston to try to fight this. Yeah. The army, we can look at units in queue, see if anyone's queuing up. Forjustice is queuing up some more Ashy. So he should have the military advantage. Stanley Winston's going to be forced to go behind. I think it's probably a good choice to have a little bit bigger army here as opposed to focusing on trying to age up. It's definitely a different choice between each players, but if you are able to put pressure on the enemy and take down the shrines, you're going to have more shrines out, more economy, and your opponent's not going to have those shrines. So there's that, but we'll see if the age up from Stanley Winston can do something. Looks like it's a Golden Pavilion age up. Looking good. If if Forjustice was paying attention to this score, you would see that the score dropped a little bit from the resources going down. So he might have been paying attention to that. We have the Bestiros coming in, not doing a whole lot. A little bit of a Bestiro fight here. To be honest, the Ashy are able to, Stanley Winston and Ashy are putting some work in, despite being completely outnumbered. So good micro from him, but Forjustice definitely has the army advantage. Forjustice is aging up just a little bit slower, so not that delayed. He used 600 coin to do so. No one has any trade posts at the moment. We look at just one villager aging up, also Golden Pavilion, but 3 villagers aging on that. So he might actually, I think he's going to age up faster if it stays like that. Looking at the fight over here, we can look at the units lost. 4 Ashy lost from Stanley Winston, 6 shrines, 2 only from Forjustice, and also a trade post. I didn't see that go down, but maybe it was just started and then it went down. Alright, so looking good. It looks like Forjustice definitely has the lead in economy right now because he's focused the early military and therefore the shrine advantage. He's got 19, or he's got 20 shrines out as opposed to Stanley Winston's 12. So far it looks like a better approach to the game from Forjustice, but we'll see how it works. We look at the military units. It is by far in favor of Forjustice right now. Not quite sure why maybe the 600 coin made that much of a difference. We can look at the villagers, see how the market ups. Okay, so Stanley Winston has got an additional market up. His Yumi are idled back here, and the fight, that's not a fight you want to take. Kind of losing free units right there. Looking at the heroes for both players, one of Stanley Winston's is down, and on the other hand, both are up from Forjustice, but they're not getting any scouting information, so pretty similar situation there. Have some shrines going up in base by Stanley Winston. I'm pretty sure he got that from the Lakota upgrade. That's actually a really good choice. That's going to be give yourself the advantage in being able to have a few more shrines out, getting a few more. At the same time, though, Forjustice didn't need to invest in that upgrade, and he still has all of his shrines. So it's kind of like it's a comeback maneuver, and you're paying to come back some. Yeah, looking good. This fight is really close. Looking at the military, though, that's a lot more military out from on the map from Forjustice, but man, Stanley Winston keeps on losing units here, needlessly. He does have the defender's advantage with having the barracks close by, so maybe he could pull this off, but he just has a much smaller army to start with. If he had, the flaming arrows come out, that is huge. That is really huge. We have for Justice, he sent the combat for Ashigaru, and on the other hand we have the flaming arrows coming out, so definitely advantage to Stanley Winston there. Looking at the military units, while Forjustice has a lot more military units, it's kind of offset by the flaming arrows there. They're worth so much, and unless you have units that can take those down, it's not going to work that well. We have 2 cherry orchard rickshaws coming out for Forjustice. This one cherry orchard is almost depleted. On the other hand, Stanley Winston has about 3,000 left on his. He is now sending the Ashigaru upgrade. See if these Yamabushi go down. We're still on 11 shrines for Stanley Winston and 20 for Forjustice. So, oh man, that's crazy right there. They're so close. Okay, they noticed them. Okay. Looks like some of the shrines from Forjustice are not picking up any bison though. So I mean, it's better to have a shrine on nothing than it is to not have the shrine at all, but yeah. Preferably, if we look at the difference, it is 0.6 food per second versus, okay, let me look here. It's 0.52 coin per second as opposed to 0.2. So significant difference there. It's almost 2.5, it's a little over 2.5 times better, 250% better if you have it on Bison specifically. Looking at this, we have Forjustice pushing in. He knows that there's flaming arrows there, but he's choosing to engage anyways with the flaming arrows coming in from behind. He still might win this fight though, because he just has that much more of a military mass, that much more of an economy. The flaming arrows do get onto the other flaming arrows. Are they gonna... Oh, this is really close. This flaming arrow is on 5 HP. Let's see if that's microed well. Okay, one does go down. I don't see how Stanley Winston comes back from this. Yeah, GG. Well played. We can look at some of the post-game stats here. We have a lot more units killed from Forjustice. Decent amount of more combat XP. Look at the military unit population. Definitely in favor of Forjustice pretty much the whole game. Looking at the resources gathered, the same deal. Looking at the villager population, once again, advantage to Forjustice. Getting out shrines also gives you more XP, and so that makes a difference. Having the villagers out, though, I think he must have aged. Let's see, okay, so with the food, he was able to age up sooner. And there was a little bit of delay before Stanley Winston delayed a little bit so that he could age up at a decent time. Looking at the shipments, yeah, definitely more shipments. Once the shrines came out for Forjustice, you can see how much of a difference the XP treasure and the earlier shrine, the wood treasures, came for Forjustice. That concludes the game number 1, match between Stanley Winston and Forjustice. Winner is Forjustice. Well played. We are going to get into the next game very shortly here. Let's see how it goes. Looking good. So the next map, they're probably going to ask who picks first, and it is NWC, aka Stanley picking first. And the map is Fraser River. All right, so that was a Japan mirror. So neither player can play Japan for the next 2 games. It's interesting when picking your first civs because you don't want to pick you want to have an advantage, but you don't want to pick a civ that you want to pick later in game 2 and game 3. All right, so Stanley locks in France. That's just a very good generic civ. It's good into most matchups, if not all, and it just gives you an option to deal. So if you're gonna blind pick, you want a civ that doesn't have any glaring weaknesses, and France is that. Forjustice locks in Iroquois. We're gonna get it started really shortly here. This is game number 2 between Stanley Winston and Forjustice. Stanley Winston is with NWC. Forjustice is with Nilla Ninjas NN. This is France versus Iroquois. Should be a really good map. This is one of a really good match. This is one of my favorite maps, honestly. You've got a lot of different options. I have seen many different strategies work on this map, anywhere from booming to an FF and hard push to even a hard push in the first place, hard push H2. So this map comes down a lot to how you prepare and how you prepare for your opponent. It's really interesting. Fraser River here. So we'll take a look at the map first, and get everything sorted. I'm gonna flip the logos for the respective teams, and because they have swapped sides up there. And looking at it, we can look at the map. This is a pretty fair map generally. 2 mines for Stanley, 2 mines for Forjustice. Equal number of mines spawned on each side of the map. 2 hunts for Forjustice and 2 hunts for Stanley Winston, which he has already started gathering. It looks like he is gathering some wood. He's going to be building a house, a trade post, and then a house. On the other side, we have Iroquois gathering wood also, gathering pure wood. This Travois is going forward to scout. He may be able to get a little bit of information before he builds a building with it, such as a longhouse or possibly something else. I don't know what else he would do. It's going to be a longhouse, I'm pretty sure. You could do a farm, but on a map without livestock, it's not very good. He is back onto food. He was gathered wood just for a trade post, as expected. Or if you're going to be gathering wood, that's what's to be expected. It's not very common on EP to do that, especially with without having a wood start. Or it was a wood start. There we go. Wood start chopped an extra 100 wood, was able to get that. We look at the treasures picked up. Stanley Winston got a bear and 30 coin picked up by Forjustice. And the 40 wood treasure coming down from Forjustice, that's pretty good. The scout has offered a lot of potential. A lot of scouting information already. He's scouted most of the map. We have Stanley Winston over here. He picked up 50 food. It's a good treasure, going to help you age a little bit sooner. It's going to start this treasure with an additional scout. So scouts are really something that is not mentioned all the time, but is very, very valuable. You get a lot more information on the map, and they can also go stealthy, watching your opponent's army without them even knowing it a lot of the time. You have a longhouse that came down in a really good spot between cliffs here, so it can spot any incoming raids a little bit easier. We have both players gathering lots of food. It looks like Stanley Winston is about to age up a little bit sooner, partly in thanks to the food treasure he got. Forjustice not long behind, though. Go ahead and age up, Stanley. Thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it. Let me double check this here. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, taking a look. I don't have my alerts set up so I can see them. I'm sorry about that, but I really appreciate ESOC. Really appreciates the follows and the donations, the subs. They really help promote Age of Empires 3 and make it a more well-known game and more players playing it, which is going to help everybody out. A little bit of a fight here between a scout and a villager. It's just harassing, really. The scout, though, may go down to the TC fire. That's actually more important than most people realize. It's worth it for some extra XP and not denying the ability for them to use the scout to spot any incoming armies. The scout is fighting over here. It's low HP. If he's not careful, he might lose it also. Losing both of them for free is a mistake. Losing one is... it's not ideal by any means, but losing both, you have no ability to stealth your scout and see where the opponent's army is or any additional information. It is one thing to note, though. The Iroquois War Chief gives the military units are close to him, a 10% buff on EP. It's changed from RE being 15%, but 10% hit points buff. So he's going to stick with his army pretty much anyway. So perhaps Stanley Winston was taking that into account and just saying, well, going to try to annoy him a little bit, try to cause some idle time, which he did do here. Took some HP off of the war chief, but personally I'd rather just have my scout giving me information on what the opponent is doing rather than losing it for a little bit of idle villager time and a little bit of HP on a war chief. Looking at the shipments sent, we have 700 wood that came in from Stanley Winston. He is going to get a house up now. I'm guessing he probably sent 4 vills. He's probably, okay, sending 4 net vills now perhaps. The current economic units, it's 16, so he sent 4 vills. Or no, sorry. Units in queue. He started, it looks like he probably did send 4 vills. He's got a stable out. A few houses. On the other hand, we just have a war hut. That was from the age up travois that Iroquois get automatically with each age up. France on 2 TPs, just finished a second. Iroquois on 2 also. Some muskets coming out here from the barracks, and they're probably going to put some pressure on the TPs here. On the other hand, we have, that's actually an 800 resource card from Iroquois on EP. It's changed from the 600 on RE, and it does it gives a lot of bonus actually. 800 resources in crates in Age 2 is only Iroquois has that. We've got the hero who used his ability trying to get some damage on the musketeers. Trying to just delay them, keep that trade post staying up as long as possible. Looks like we have 700 coin coming in from Stanley Winston. He should be trying to age up pretty soon, I would guess, with that. He might put some pressure instead. He still has several villagers on coin, though, so maybe he's just going to be putting pressure instead. On the opposite side, we have, let's look at units in queue. And Iroquois is almost hitting age 3. The economy is a little bit better for France, kind of as expected. Their villagers are worth 1.25 normal villagers. Gather an additional 25% faster. The age up comes from Iroquois though, and Stanley Winston in France shouldn't be far behind. He's about to click up himself. So looking at the decks, we have Iroquois, lots of military shipments, age 2 and 3. He only has a couple military ups. Let's see. On the other hand, France, same kind of deal. He's got lots of crate shipments. He's not going to be able to use many of his age 2 ones, but he does have several shipments in age 3, including the 2 falconets. That's one thing that Iroquois do not have. They have amazing cannons, and they're light cannons age 4, but age 3 it's just they don't have any cannons. You have to go to age 4. The light cannons from Iroquois have 32 range and also do well versus opponents' artillery, so they're exceptional really. They're one of the best, if not debatably the best cannons late game. Heavy cannons and the like perhaps are better, but they have 4 less range, and they also you have to train them out of the factory and or use shipments for them. We have forest prowlers coming out from Iroquois. He has 18 of them compared to Stanley Winston's 11. He's going to need those falconets to be able to deal with these forest prowlers. I would guess he built the second barracks. He's expecting this one to go down probably. Lots of forest prowlers coming out from Iroquois. That's 18 of them. Forest prowlers are an amazing unit, really. There's an upgrade you can get in the war hut that gives them 2 additional range for 22 range, which when it comes to a gunpowder skirmisher type unit is the most range of all of them in the game. There's a longbow and Yumi that have more range, but they do not fire with gunpowder, so it's a little bit harder to use them in kiting and shooting and running back. Looking at the market ups, we have hunting dogs and placer mines coming in from Iroquois, and on the other hand, we have steel traps and placer mines from France. Kind of to be expected from both players. We do have a corral that has come up, and he has trained musket riders out of them. Musket riders are an interesting unit. A lot of people don't like them that much, but they're actually pretty fast. 7.25 speed, but you have a big button in the stable that allows you to make them go even faster. I'm sure it's not used that much in 1v1, but it allows them to be one of the fastest, if not the fastest, ranged cavalry type units in the game. The Falconets do come out, and Stanley Winston is able to push this back. He lost a barracks, but that's not a huge deal. Losing the trade post would have been more important for sure. Have musket riders just going out over here. Looking at the military units, it is 13 skirmishers, 15 musketeers, and 2 falconets for Stanley. And on the other hand, 1 Aina, 19 forest prowlers, and 11 musket riders. We have 1,200 resource shipment that just came in for Iroquois. He might be trying to age up, because versus this army of falconets and musketeers, you don't really want to. You don't have great options. Kanya horsemen cost wood. Looking at the deck, he could send the Renegade France or the Kanya horsemen shipments. But with that many muskets out, it's only 15. There are some gendarmes behind. Oh, this is bad for Forjustice. Lost some free musket riders there. Yeah, he definitely needs something to deal with the falconets. He could stealth his forest prowlers and get some free shots on to the falconets, possibly. We'll see what happens here, though. Looking at the resources, neither player looks like they're going to be aging up soon. The economy for Justice is a little bit behind Stanley Winston, but for it being France is actually really close. So that's good to see. Musket riders just coming in here, and they're going to pick off 1 falconet and back off. I'm not sure I'd want that engagement. With the gendarmes coming in right behind, this is really bad for Forjustice. Gonna snare all those units and do a lot of damage. The falconet is just sitting back, though. I would have liked to see that come forward. Forest, honestly, for this situation, Forjustice is doing really well in his micro of it. He had some idle musket riders, though. He could have been focusing the gendarmes a little bit. There's a few gendarmes left. I still like this fight more from Stanley Winston, but Forjustice did all he could in trying to make it work as well as possible. I do have to say, the War Chief sitting back, though, and dying, you definitely want it near your units. 10% more HP is a decent amount. On an army like this, it can be well over 1,000 additional HP on your army. Oh, big raid coming in here from Stanley Winston. There should be several villagers going down. And the Kanya horsemen are coming forward. I wonder if these Kanya horsemen, if he's paying attention, this falconet will go down really easily. That's a lot of villagers going down, though. That's huge. That's something that you can't necessarily come back from. I don't know what's going to happen here. Forjustice's only option, really, when you lose that many villagers, your only option in a game like this is to push out really hard and try to take a huge military advantage quickly, because you're not going to have the economy to be able to withstand pumping out units at the same speed as your opponent. The Kanya do come in and snare the skirmishers. These should go down. Definitely not an overreach by Stanley. He saw the vills, and it's an okay trade to trade that. We do have gendarmes coming in, though. The last musket rider goes down. This could be pretty good for Stanley. And Forjustice splits up his skirmishers. Could have done it a bit more, But splitting them up like that means that the Gendarmes are not going to do as much area damage onto the Forest Prowlers. Yeah, this is interesting. Some good plays by both players and a little bit of mistakes by both players. Lots of Kanya Horsemen being trained. This is an interesting choice. You already see Stanley Winston going Gendarmes, and Kanya Horsemen cost a lot of wood. They have decent stats. We look at some of the stats: 356 HP and 33 attack. On the other hand, the Gendarme is 575 HP, 34 attack, and 3 population, costing 150 food, 150 coin. We take a look at this one. It costs 100 food, 75 wood. So definitely interesting there. The Gendarmes also have trample damage, which does quite a bit. And the Kanya Horsemen just barely missed the villagers coming out. If he had picked up those villagers, the game could look a lot different. If he lost all 6 villagers, then it would be roughly around 38 economy versus 29 economy recalculated economic unit population. So it's, I don't know. That was a shame he didn't find those. TP does go down from on Stanley Winston's side. Does he find these villagers? He does. This could be really good. And he uses the micro super well. They are trapped and they should probably all go down. And lots more idle villagers at the same time. Looking at the military, we can look at the military units out on the field right now. It is in favor of Iroquois. Not by a crazy amount, but it is in favor. We have a second TC going up by Stanley Winston. He can train villagers from it, but it's probably more for controlling the map. We do have Forjustice coming in with his army. Stanley Winston's army is a little bit out of position, but I'm not sure Forjustice wants to fight under the TC anyways. If he had known where Stanley Winston was, perhaps he could have taken down a barracks. It's going to start attacking it now. It might go down. The Mantlets have a decent amount of siege with 50 siege. That's actually pretty good. Looking at the other units, they don't have very high siege though. Forest Prowler only has 15. It looks like Stanley Winston is backing up a little bit, trying to escort his villagers to some hunts and mines. That's one thing about this map. If you have a military advantage over your opponent and you use it well, you can deny them from a lot of hunts and mines, assuming they don't wall or things like that. With this map, there's only 3 crossings, and you can actually wall this middle part here. So it can be a decently turtley, defensive, boomy map if you choose to play it like that. We look at some of the ups that the units have. The Goons have the only French up that they have, Cavalry Combat. None of the other cards affect Dragoons for France. On the other hand, for Justice, I don't believe he's sent, let's see. Yeah, he has not sent any big raid coming in here. This is huge. Stanley Winston is going to have to fight this. He doesn't really have a choice with that many villagers in there. This could be a really big fight. Free Forest Prowlers going down. That's not good. But if this TC did go down, I mean, he can pop the CDB out. Let's see if there's some more CDB. Okay, he does have Great Coats and Blunderbuss. So this is perhaps an overreach from Forjustice. He might have forgotten that he's playing against France, and CDB are able to do a whole lot. However, if he did take out a bunch of those villagers, it would kind of be okay. The Gendarmes are going in on the cavalry. With the trample damage, that makes them pretty good versus them, but be better on the Forest Prowlers. The Dragoons were fighting the Skirmishers too, so a little bit of missed micro from both players. The CDB come out and are going to do some damage themselves. This is a really close fight, guys. Could decide the game, actually. The economy is actually really close between the two players right now. It looks like Stanley Winston's going to clean this up, albeit pretty close fight all around. The CDB are going to jump back in, and he's deciding to just put them inside the TC instead of fighting with them. Interesting choice. I was assuming they're going to fight, and therefore Stanley Winston might win it, but putting your weak CDB back in the TC might be a good idea. It's really close here. Huge military lead for Forjustice. All of, or most of Stanley Winston's villagers are idled or fighting right now, so they are not gathering resources to pump more units out. And if we look at the units in queue, we just now see a unit being produced from Stanley Winston. So pretty close fight all in all. We look at the units lost. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell from all that, but yeah, it's I don't know, really close game. The economy is really close now, a little bit in favor of Iroquois. While on the other hand, we have France having a lot of idle time all in all. And it looks like this trade post probably won't go up. Oh my goodness, this is a crazy good game. You don't see a game like this, this close, this swingy all the time. One player has an advantage, and then the other player, and then the other player. This is a really, really close game. Stanley definitely needs his villagers to be gathering, though. I'm pretty sure you're going to look at the resources gathered at the end of this this game, and you're going to see that Stanley Winston just kind of flatlined in his resources coming in for a little while there with all of them fighting. Strong army pushing in here for Justice. I don't know what France is going to do at this point. He's trying really hard to micro well, and he's doing decently well at it, but yeah, he doesn't have an army. Look at the military units out. He's trying to raid, and he's doing a good job at it. Yeah, and he resigns. Yeah, GG. That was a well-played game for both players. Very swingy. I thought Stanley Winston had it for a time there, but it goes back into Forjustice's favor. Some good gameplay from both players. Looking at the units killed, pretty close. Combat XP, very close. It tells you how close of a game it was when it's like that. We can look at the military unit population, and it swings from Stanley Winston's favor to Forjustice to Stanley Winston, and then he kind of has the military unit lead from then on. But the Falconets definitely had a role there. So if you take the Falconets into account, how pop efficient they are, he definitely had a lead there. You can look at the resources gathered. Yeah, you kind of see it flatlined here. This is the fight between under Stanley Winston's TC there, and most of his villagers were not gathering. Look at the villager population. It's actually really close. Really close, especially considering that France's villagers are worth a lot more. See that big raid that Stanley took here? Stanley got in on Forjustice, and I thought that was a deciding moment in the game, but Forjustice pulled it back and did really, really well. I need to update the score. 2 for Forjustice and 0 for Stanley Winston. Well played by both players. We are going to get into the next match shortly here. Yeah, what you guys think of that game? Tell me about it in chat. Yeah, and he resigns. Yeah, GG. That was a well-played game for both players. Very swingy. Alrighty. We are going to get into the next game shortly. It looks like ESO may be having a little bit of a problem. I am going to go to the stream overlay for just a bit, unless you guys want me to talk. I'll probably just try chatting a little bit. That game was really close. I really like games like that. It was very swingy. One player could have won, and then the other player, and then back. I see the chat. Imperial Noob says France versus Euro is like black versus white in chess. Yeah, yeah, it's kind of a chess match here. It's crazy how strategic some of these games can be, and positioning of your army and everything. I like the balance of that game too, Sampuku. Um, it's yeah, really good balance between the civs. Great game there. I am going to reload this. It should be up shortly. Let's see. That was a great game. Getting into the next game here. That was a nice comeback by Forjustice. I thought that Stanley Winston lost a decent amount of his army taking out the villagers, but that was a lot of villagers that went down. I thought he might be able to pull it back. Both players did really well in the aftermath of those villagers going down, trying to snare the opponent and taking some good fights. We are into the next game here. And we'll be getting started really shortly. The next map is, let's take a look real quick. The next map is Dhaka. This is a map, some controversy on the map. Some players like it a lot, some players don't so much. There's several lakes on the map similar to New England or the like, and it allows you to ship warships through cards. For the here, Forjustice picks first. It allows you to ship warships into the little lakes and control a lot of the map because of that. There's additionally some things that aren't utilized every game, such as there is a Bhakti trade post, native trade post, on the top of the map, where you can get an upgrade from there, and unless it's nerfed on EP, it should be a 40% boost to you gathering from berry bushes, which is huge. 40% faster gathering from berry bushes is crazy good, and there's a lot of berry bushes up there. I don't see that used very often though. Maybe a civilization like Japan, which neither player can use here, but a civilization like Japan could use that really well. Additionally, there's 4 trade posts. They're often fought over, more so than a lot of things. There's additionally a lot of water with some whales and a lot of fish. Players can choose to do that, take the fish. We often see players going for water a little bit, a lot of fishing boats, but in 1v1 we don't see it that often. We don't see players going for the fishing boats and fighting over sea super hard. But we'll see what happens here. Forjustice is going to pick first. He can't choose Iroquois or Japan, and on the other hand, Stanley cannot choose France or Japan, I believe. Yeah, the game map is Dhaka. You guys can see the thumbnail of it right now. It's a very interesting map. It's a very unusual map, but it has a lot of different aspects to the map that you could utilize really well if you plan for the map really well. We don't see a lot of players using some things like the berry bushes on top, but a lot of players, almost every game you see on Dhaka, you see players shipping warships into the lake right here. Forjustice locks Brits, and Stanley Winston locks Brits also. So this is a Brits mirror on Dhaka. Stanley Winston versus Forjustice. This is EPL Season 2, Week 2, and this should be a really good match here. If anything, if we have any inkling from the last game where it was really, really close, very swingy, this could be a really good game. The map favors people who prepare for it well, similar to Fraser River. So this could be really, really interesting. getting into the game, it is Dhaka. Talked about the map a lot. We will see how the players spawn on the overlay. Stanley Winston is not Nilin Ninjas. I'm gonna change that real quick for you guys. He is NWC, and Forjustice is Nilin Ninjas. Getting back to the game, we can move the population over here for you guys. And it looks like it is a, let's see, a food start, it looks like. Or no, it was a wood start, okay. A wood start, 2 mainers coming out from both players. Pretty kind of what's to be expected. One option that you don't see players doing very often is going for a trade post and a mainer on a wood start. Not in 1v1 at least, what I've seen. But it can be pretty good because you only have to chop 35 wood. You need 335 wood total. It looks like we have some more wood being chopped from Forjustice. He may be trying to get an additional mainer out. On the other hand, Stanley Winston is not going for an additional mainer. We have a elephant. No. I looked at the mines. I did not. I looked at the mini map and did not see this. We're gonna yeah, I saw the berry bushes and saw that it looked fair from the mini map, but definitely not the case. No deer spawned and not enough elephants spawned for Justice. So we're getting into a of that game. The mines spawned fair, but not the hunts on that map. We'll get started very shortly. Alrighty, so this is now game number 3, EPL Season 2, Week 2, between Stanley Winston and NWC versus Forjustice and NN. That is Nilla Ninjas and New World Challengers. We looking at the map, the mines, although spawning differently, are pretty fair. I'll take a look at the hunts real quick. Also very fair. Much better map generation. We have the 2 games up for Forjustice. And yeah, look, this will be an interesting map. One thing that's interesting about this spawn that I don't usually see is that looking on the mini map, this crossing here is a little bit diagonal. It's not straight across. It's not something you see every day, but it doesn't really favor one player over the other, I don't think. Perhaps it favors Stanley Winston a little bit because he can get his boats a little bit closer to the enemy here, but it doesn't matter that much. Both players going for the yaks. That's a good choice. On this map, yaks spawn on the top, and usually we only see one player in these tournament games going for the yaks and getting several of them. Both players going for the yaks, though. That's a lot of free food once they fatten, or you can use them before they fatten even. They gather much faster than hunts. We're looking at it. This time, we have Forjustice making just 2 mainers and not gathering his last 20 wood. I'm pretty sure you can see it, but he's got a 40 wood treasure there. That's really nice. On the other hand, Stanley Winston gathered his crates, all of his crates. It's just 20 wood. I don't know how I feel about that. A lot of pros wouldn't gather the higher ranked pros would not gather the extra 20 wood. But your villager is going to be forced to go back there and gather it later. It does mean that you can perhaps age up 2 seconds faster, maybe. but it also means a little bit more idle villager time in transition. It just depends a little bit. Looking at the treasures that have been picked up, a few coin treasures from both, 30 XP from Stanley Winston and 40 wood from him, while 80 wood for Forjustice. So really close on that front. There's still several yaks that have not been picked up. I think it would be really good for players to do some map generations and see where these yaks spawn, because I've seen them spawn in almost the same exact spot every game, and if you were able to pick up all those yaks, it could be a big favor for you. As it is, each player only has one yak at the moment. We'll go to Shipments sent and see how that's going. And Stanley Winston ages up slightly before Forjustice, despite Forjustice not gathering that additional 20 wood. Looks like, I don't know, maybe just a little bit more hurting coming out for Forjustice, and Stanley Winston not hurting quite as much. It's working out well, though. A market coming up for Stanley Winston. We can look at the decks, see how different they are. They're actually a fair amount of difference, actually. Forjustice has a lot of warship upgrades. Naval Gunners, 25% more attack, and 25% more attack in HP. Honestly, I think I would rather prefer the card that does 20% more attack and 5 more range, but I don't know, we'll see. 5 more range in a little lake like this can be really nice, gives you that much more map control. Got Maynard coming out from Stanley Winston, and on the other side, we have the 4th Maynard coming out from Forjustice. Looking at the ups in the market, both players have hunting dogs now. Stanley Winston getting it a little bit sooner. Let's see, both players send 3 villagers. Both players have schooners. Neither player is going for the water. We see Stanley Winston's deck as having 6 land military shipments, and on the other hand, Forjustice has 5, not having the 3 rockets. A little bit of different military shipments too. Stanley Winston has more crates, and Forjustice does not have as many crates. It has the warship upgrades instead. Having whale oil as opposed to the Age 1 fishing upgrade that does 25% more for fishing and whales is an interesting choice. If you're going to gather only whales, obviously the whales is better, but a lot of times you're going to be gathering some fish too if you're going to be making fishing boats. Looking at the shipments that have come in, 700 wood from both. Pretty mere matchup from both sides. Pretty interesting. We do have barracks coming out from Stanley Winston here and a forward outpost. A little bit more of a defensive one from Forjustice and a defensive barracks also. Looks like Stanley may... No, he's not going after the treasure. He's just trying to skirt the map vision. He's gonna maybe pick off a villager. Let's see. Yeah, he should be able to pick off 1 villager. Let's see, anything else interesting going on? As far as Mainers, we have Forjustice up 1 Mainer on Stanley Winston, but both are building them. Looks like a 2nd barracks coming out from Stanley Winston, while Forjustice is opting to go for a few more Mainers. Interesting choice there. I think both strategies has merit, but in a mirror like this, a little bit stronger economy can go a long way towards defending your go a long way. You can defend, have defender's advantage, and if you have a better economy, you'll end up pulling ahead, or if you micro the same at least. Looking at the rest of the map, idle explorers. They're not really scouting each other. I don't think Forjustice knows that these buildings are this far forward. He does have the muskets. He did see the muskets, so he knows that he has some out. Looking at the resources, neither player is looking to age up very soon. Forjustice sent 5 villagers. and Stanley Winston sent 600 wood. With that 600 wood, he's getting some more mainers up, and we'll have some villagers with that. We have pure muskets for Stanley Winston right now, and some longbows. I prefer the longbows. They're not the best unit versus heavy infantry, having only 1.25 multiplier versus them, but they have a lot more range, and they can do pretty well versus the muskets. Looking at the resources, it looks like Forjustice may be macroing for a age 3 up right now. He does have 700 coin. He might be sending that. Looking at the rest, lots of muskets out. Stanley Winston is just trying to put some pressure with all these muskets. Everything's looking good regarding the stream. Let me know if anything needs to be changed, guys. It's looking really smooth though. So we can look at the units in queue. Forjustice just started aging to 3. Just a villager out from Stanley Winston. Forjustice is starting to build some more musketeers now. I like the choice to go musketeer and cav in a situation like this. A few longbows earlier, fine, but if you look at the stats, I would almost prefer musketeers. I think I probably would prefer musketeers in a large fight where there's not kiting. 95 HP, 17 attack. They fire faster than the musketeers, but they have 30% range resist. On the other hand, 150 HP, 23 attack. So they're actually very even. But if you are going musketeers and cavalry, and the opponent is going longbows and I don't know, cavalry or something, then the musketeers and cavalry would definitely have an advantage. One player could go musketeers and cavalry, another one go musketeers and longbowmen. Could be interesting then for sure. Musketeers in hand mode and melee mode do pretty well versus cavalry. We finally have a second barracks coming up from Forjustice. As far as mainers go, still a few more for Stanley Winston, but you did send the 600 wood for that. Forjustice is gathering a decent amount of wood. He's almost hitting age 3 in just a bit. Stanley Winston is almost halfway aged up. Looking at the military units, we got 28 muskets for Stanley Winston, 25 for Forjustice, and 10 longbowmen. It'll be interesting to see what they do in age 3. Looking at the military shipments, they obviously both have 2 falconets. Forjustice has 10 longbows, 5 cavalry as his additional age 3 military shipments. He does have the frigate. Stanley Winston, on the other hand, has 9 musketeers, 5 cavalry, and 1 frigate. So it looks like it's going to be a little bit more on the longbowman side from Forjustice. It could, if we have an artillery foundry coming up from Stanley Winston. That's a good choice. Going cavalry in a situation like, going artillery foundry in a situation like this will allow you to get cannons out, and pure infantry versus infantry fight, cannons will do a whole lot. 2 falconets shipped for Justice. Neither player has gone for any of the trade posts, the trade route. We do have Forjustice that has chosen to do the Bhakti natives, like I was saying earlier before the game. Forjustice takes down the outpost and is taking down the barracks. It's definitely a push for Forjustice. Can try to look at units in queue and see. Okay, cannon is coming out from the artillery foundry. He is gonna need more coin to get more popped out though. 2 more barracks going up in the back because his front ones are destroyed. Looking at it, 2 falconets come out. That can be pretty nice. 2 falconets being trained out of the artillery foundry. That's probably all he's gonna get. Doesn't have enough coin for another one before the pop comes out. Yeah, so 4 cannons. 4 cannons though is gonna give yourself the advantage when it comes to artillery, and it will force Forjustice back. Definitely some buildings lost though. 2 barracks and a an outpost. 4 cannons, though, from Stanley Winston, and a frigate from Forjustice. So this is interesting. The longbows go on to the cannons, and a falconet goes down. Let's see. Okay, 2 falconets go down. Definitely better micro from Forjustice here. Maybe a better choice to go for the falconets, but yeah, the longbows are able to help take out some of the falconets, and that is definitely in the favor for Forjustice there. It looks like, yeah, the cannon goes down. All the advantage Stanley Winston had with the cannons is over pretty much. It's he doesn't have more cannons in queue. I don't know how Stanley Winston is going to pull this back, honestly. It's the Minutemen do come out, but that's just such a big mass. We can look at the military units, try to compare them a little bit. Much bigger mass for Forjustice. I think this is honestly kind of GG. I don't know what he could do. Stanley Winston could ship some muskets, but I mean, yeah, that's kind of GG. If we look at the units lost, he also lost 8 villagers. So big favor for Forjustice at this point. It'd be very hard for Stanley Winston to come back. We can root for him, but it would be very difficult. Forjustice has more manors, more villagers from that, and he's still adding to his army. A few more as the musket goes down. A lot of Stanley Winston's villagers have been idled and had to transition to a different place to gather. We do have cavalry coming out from Forjustice. That was a shipment, not a stable and producing them themselves. Looking at the map, free XP from the Explorer for Forjustice. I think maybe let's see. Seeing how I'm trying to figure out how Stanley Winston could get an advantage here. We do see a artillery foundry coming out from Forjustice. That's a good choice when you see your opponent has obviously made an artillery foundry himself. If a frigate was shipped and musketeers put some damage on the frigate first, if he has the advantage in this lake, that could mean a big amount of difference. And it looks like the frigate's gonna... I don't know if he saw them. That was really close to being able to see or not. Let's see what happens here. This is kind of a make it or break it kind of move for Stanley Winston. He's so far behind. He just needs to kill a bunch of vills or something along those lines. And going after the cav. Oh, I'm not sure if Forjustice had seen that the first time. If he had not gone after the cav, he may have been able to go after the vills and done some more damage like that. He is going to find this Explorer before the TC goes down, though. He's probably going to kill off the TC. Yeah, that's a good find for him. But at this point, this army is so far from his own town. I don't know what could be done. You can look at the military units on the field. Neither player is looking to age up soon. Forjustice did end up sending the 1,000 wood, finishing off the last of his manors, sorry. And he is gathering from the berry bushes, having the Bhakti upgrade. Looking at all the raids in the back here. Definitely a few villagers going down. Last looked, we saw that Stanley had lost 8 villagers. That is 4 villagers going down in this raid. Going to be at least 5 villagers going down. That's a pretty good raid there. He also lost his starting TC. I don't know what he can do at this moment. We can look at military units and see the siege potential. A little bit more muskets out from Stanley, but Forjustice has a few falconets, so pretty close. Definitely in favor of Forjustice there. Stanley's already lost his base, though, so in a base trade, if you've already lost your base before you even have destroyed any of the opponent's base, it's kind of like a GG right there. If all that matters is the base trade. Lots of villagers going down for Forjustice. It might just be too little too late. We can see the economy and the military unit difference. It's just landslide in favor of Forjustice. He might even go to his opponent's base and gather those berry bushes over there. Never know. More villagers going down. We can see how many units were lost. I believe he had only killed one villager up until this point. He kills 7. So that's something. It's better than the 5 earlier. This is becoming a very scrappy game. Who can hide their villagers better? A little bit of a base trade. I think maybe Forjustice should have come back there, defended. If he defends his base here, one base is down to the other base. He defends it anyways. So maybe I was wrong. Definitely does well there. Looking at the military units. A bunch more musketeers do come forward. Looking at the upgrades for them. More upgrades for Stanley Winston. Veteran longbow just coming in for Forjustice here. Lots of villagers going down here for Stanley Winston. That's gonna hurt. That's an additional 7 villagers going down. These villagers just walked over the explorers, so Forjustice, if he paid attention, would know that they are there. Musketeer, 2 barracks that came up here. The cannons, though, Stanley Winston isn't going to be able to gauge versus those cannons unless he gets really lucky. Maybe bad positioning from Forjustice or whatnot. The one thing that Stanley Winston does have going for him is that I was going to say his army's all together, but now it's split up. He could use his army to take out this smaller army, and then he might have an advantage, but I don't know. It looks like it's going to be more of a, this army's caught out. They're both kind of caught out. They're both between 2 rocks and a hard place, and 2 hard places. And he's going to focus the cannons. That's the right choice there, but that's going to be a lot of musketeers going down. It's GG. GG for the game. That is Forjustice taking game number 3 on Dhaka. We can look at some of the post-game stats here. We've got many more units killed from Forjustice, almost twice the amount of combat XP. We can look at the resources gathered. It was actually very, very even, like you'd kind of expect in a Brits Mirror. In fact, even a little bit more favored to Stanley Winston until later into the game. Can look at, that was resources gathered. Look at villager population. Very close. It swings back and forth a little bit. And once Stanley loses villagers, then it's kind of just over in that aspect. Can look at the military unit population. Stanley Winston started off a little bit earlier, but Forjustice, like I was saying earlier in the game, Forjustice opted to go with a little bit more economy than the opponent. And in Mirror, I think that's really good. He defended to start with, got a little bit stronger economy, and was able to pull it out because of that. That was an excellent game number 3. I hope we have a really good game number 4. That is the end of that game. We'll get into the next one very shortly. Alrighty. Forjustice versus Stanley Winston. Alright, looking good. Alright, we'll be getting into the next game. Forjustice is hosting now. Take a look. Yeah, that was a good game last game. I'm going to join as soon as Stanley Winston joins. Really shortly here. Forjustice just proving to outsmart, and I would say, honestly, I wouldn't even say it's outsmarting. In some cases it is, but I think, I don't know, it's just really, really close matches. Just favors Forjustice just a little bit better. Alright, joining this game. Waiting on Stanley to get in here. Well, it's gonna look good. Yeah, I agree with you, Asperger. When he lost the 4 Falconets, and there was still, I believe it was both Falconets still up for Forjustice. That was really big. In 1v1, you don't see cannon fights like you do a lot in later game scenarios. So Stanley Winston, all right, should be joining, getting the next game going. This is game number 4. So we will have, what is that? It's going to be New World Challengers, aka Stanley Winston, picking first. And the map is Kamchatka Summer. Kamchatka Summer is interesting. This map pool has a lot of really unique maps. Yeah, laggy can be really aggravating. So Forjustice is from China. I believe Stanley Winston is American. Yeah, so this is Kamchatka Summer. It's a really interesting map. It allows for really early pressure, or you can opt to boom a little bit more. Usually I see players booming a little bit or FFs on this map, but it is very viable to put early pressure because it can be really hard to wall with a trade post going through this middle crossing. Stanley Winston locks Aztecs. That's an interesting choice. They've been getting a little bit more popularity recently. It looks like Forjustice chooses Spain into it. That's very interesting. We'll see what happens here. Sorry, I had to take a drink. This is the most talking I've done in a while. Ah, my goodness. All right, so Spanish versus Aztecs. Both civilizations are buffed a little bit for EP compared to RE. Spanish get a shipment in age 3. You send it, you get 400 coin, and every single shipment after that point, you can get an additional 400 coin. If you're able to send it really early, perhaps an FF or a semi-fast fortress, it can pay off pretty fast. Especially as Spain, you get shipments faster, you have a couple of trade posts out, you're going to be making bank with that. Their Lancers are a little bit stronger, having +1 range. And I think there's a couple other changes. They get shipments slightly faster. I think it's 3% faster. Not a huge difference, but hey, every little buff helps, right? On the other hand, we have Aztecs who got, let's see, the cover mode isn't as broken for the War Chief, if you're familiar with that in RE. Their Coyotes and Maces got a little bit of a buff themselves. Coyotes and Maces, their upgrade cards are stronger, and the base attack for Coyotes is up 10% from 10 attack to 11 attack. Alright, so this is game number 4. Forjustice versus Stanley Winston. This is EPL Season 2, Week 2. I'm going to adjust the logos for both teams, and we'll get started very shortly here. I'm going to take a look at the map. And let's see, we got 2 mines over here, 1 over here, 2, 1. It's pretty fair. All the mines are fair. Let's take a look at the hunts. 1 hunt back here, 1 in front, or 1 on each side pretty much. And over here we have 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's pretty fair. This hunt is the same as here. So we have Spain versus Aztecs. I'm not quite sure what to see from this. Maybe an FF from Spain. An FF is semi-common, or even a semi-fast fortress is semi-common on this map. Maybe you could get a few cavalry out, although a few Puma can definitely withstand that. On the other hand, I don't think Aztecs is going to do an FF. It's a possibility, but usually you opt to get some more warrior priests out, or go a little bit more economic, or even do a heavy rush from the Aztec side. All of those are very common. One strategy that has been making its rounds recently is a double war hut, just crazy unit spam from them. You ship 700 wood and 600 wood early and get a lot out. We have the war dog and the macaw just being little pet buddies right here going around the map. Same with the tiger and the macaw. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. It looks more like macaque or something, but I'm not sure. Looking at the map, let's see, we can look at the treasures that were picked up. 85 wood by Stanley Winston, 30 coin and 50 XP from Forjustice. He's going to be picking up this 40 wood in just a moment. It appears it was a food start for anyone. No, it was a coin start, sorry, for anyone curious. Both players opt to not gather that 100 coin and will instead age up quicker and gather it after the age up. Looks like Spain is considering getting this 80 coin treasure here, and Stanley Winston picked up the 40 wood treasure. Looking good. Alrighty. 3 goats out, picked up by Stanley Winston. On the other side, looks like just 1. 2, but this one hasn't been brought back. So pretty much just 2 goats, sorry, for Justice. You can take a look at the decks and the shipments sent. Both of them sent 3 villagers. They're both holding on to a shipment. Aztecs aged up fast. You don't see that every day. I'm sure he has a plan going into it though. Can look at military units. This is the deck from Forjustice. Lots and lots of military shipments. Lots of pikemen and rods. We also see this. This is the shipment, the card I was talking to you about. He's got 700 wood, 700 coin, 600 coin, and 1,000 wood. On the opposite side, Aztecs, very similar. He's got 600 infinite coin. You can send that multiple times. He additionally has 1,700 and 600 wood. He does have this card, very interesting. Age 3 farm and plantation upgrades now free. I'm not sure if he's going to use that. We'll see though. We have a war hut that was built by Aztecs here. Looking at units in queue. We have nothing being produced from them yet. Looking at Forjustice, I'm curious what he's gonna age. He did the 200 coin age up. It looks like it might be an FF. Outpost and base. He might be expecting some pressure. He doesn't have a military building going down. Did not gather the wood to do so. He might be sending 700 wood. No, he sent 700 coins. So it is probably going to be an FF. Fast Fortress. It can be pretty good. We'll see if it pays off, though. Aztecs, he scouted the, yeah, pretty sure he was able to see, maybe not. Tiger might have not had enough vision, but he may be able to see the 700 coin shipment, and if he sees that and no military buildings, it's pretty safe to assume that he's going to FF. So we'll see what Stanley Winston does in this situation. He's training some Puma. He's got 2 trade posts out. Looking at the fire pit. I'm not sure what he's dancing for right now. We'll see shortly. 5 villagers sent. He's going for a little bit more of an economic approach into his Spanish FF. I don't know what I feel about that. I do like that Stanley Winston is scouting a lot and getting more information than Forjustice is getting. That's really good. These Puma are going to be attacked by the dogs. Are they going to fight back? Yes, but probably one Puma going to go down maybe. If he pulls it back, he could save it. Trains more dogs. Alrighty. Looking... no units in queue from Forjustice yet. It's probably going to be going skirmishers then if he's not wanting to get muskets, crossbow, or something like that out of his barracks right now. More houses going up. He's got a lot of houses right now. He's sitting on a shipment and we'll have a second shipment pretty soon. See how long this trade post stays up. Yeah, it's looking good, guys. Looking back. Looking good. Alright. Aztec pulls back here. Versus an FF, if you are identifying that the opponent is doing an FF, you need to put a lot of pressure quick. Aztec have a decent boom. But an FF from Spain, though, he's going to be putting pressure really soon. Pumas aren't going to do a whole lot versus skirmishers. Yeah, Pumas are the type of unit that really is only good versus cavalry and sieging. They have 12 attack, 135 HP. They're one of the better pikeman-like units out there, but they cost 50 food, 50 coins, so they're one of the most expensive ones, too. We have a lot of pikemen out from Forjustice, so we'll see how this goes. Some more skirmishers coming out. I'm not sure I would have probably canceled those coyotes, or yeah, at least he didn't make a full batch. With that many pikemen, I'm not sure you're going to get a whole lot of value. 700 coin was sent in transition for 700 wood was sent in transition for Forjustice. So that's how he was able to get all the houses and barracks up. He sent 12 pikes. Sending 12 pikes first in H3 is a very interesting choice. I suppose it's just preparing for the 2 falconets to come afterwards. Falconets versus Age 2 Aztec army with that many pikes, it's going to be really rough for Stanley Winston. He's going to definitely have to pull back, I think, unless he gets a really, really good engagement. Micros really well. 6 coyote runners comes in, or I guess it's 5. I guess no, it is 6. It's 6. In the EP, the coyote runner shipments were increased, and the chief comes in on the cannons, but without the upgrades, does not do a whole lot. Forjustice was a little bit lax and not noticing that until the chief was pretty much on top of the cannons. He is doing a pretty good job protecting the cannons now. All those pikes definitely coming handy. Looks like he's going to do really well in this fight. See how many pikes are left. Let's go to military units. 9 pikes left. That is enough to deal with the coyotes for sure. Definitely cleans up that fight. Stanley Winston is still in Age 2 with a large military disadvantage. I'm not sure what he's going to be able to do to pull this back. Some good play. Better better strategy coming out. The Coyotes come out, and Forjustice doesn't realize. That was actually a pretty nice pop. He's gonna take. He takes down both cannons. That was huge. Taking down the cannons is really key there. It's pretty much only. It is only infantry, but a lot of Rotolaros and pikemen coming out from Forjustice. Taking down those cannons with just 5 Coyotes right before the war hut goes down is pretty big, but it's an uphill battle here. I don't know what Stanley Winston's going to be able to do. We see Forjustice opted for a heavy push instead of a little bit more of an economic approach with the Spanish gold shipment. That's probably a good choice. I mean, he's done well with it. Losing those cannons was a little bit of a mistake. Stanley Winston caught him napping there. But yeah, it pretty much it takes 2.5 shipments for Spanish gold to even pay off to be worth 1,000 gold. Once your 3rd shipment comes in, it's 1,200 gold. So it takes a little bit of time, but if you have shipments stacked, it could be pretty good. We have more units coming out. Lancers is a pretty good choice here. They do well versus everything. They do okay into pikes even, but versus the Coyotes getting in on top of the skirmishers, definitely a mistake. But only a couple going down. The army from Forjustice is that much bigger. And it looks like the Coyotes do pop out and do a little bit more damage. Just much bigger army for Forjustice. Forjustice is definitely showing up in this match. I don't see how Stanley Winston comes back from this. He's got basically no military. Yeah, there we go. GG. Fraser River was an excellent game. Some of the other games have been a little bit more one-sided this time, but hopefully we have a really close game 5. We will get into it really shortly. You can just take a quick look at the post-game stats. It wasn't that long of a game. Pretty self-explanatory what happened. Maybe Stanley Winston just wasn't expecting an FF. Booming versus an FF like that is not ideal. Yeah, he had more villagers, but not as pop efficient of military. We'll get into the 5th game shortly here. That is 4 games for Forjustice, 0 for Stanley Winston. I was expecting Stanley Winston to do pretty well, but I think maybe Forjustice just prepared super well. Let's see who picks first. Let's take a look at it. It is going to be Forjustice picking first. And the map is going to be Manchuria. Alrighty. Oh my. Alright, so let's see. They can't. Let's see. It is a Civ reset for. Or the game 4 was Civ reset, so it'll be curious to see what civilizations they go with. Forjustice picks Japan. It's a pretty good map for this, or pretty good Civ for this map. Any map with just a little bit of water where it's not super strong is pretty good for Japan. You basically have a 3 villager shipment with the 3 fishing boats. We'll see what Stanley Winston does in response to the Japan. Japan is a pretty solid civilization in Age of Empires 3, even on EP, even though they're a little bit weaker. Their boom is a little bit stronger, minimally stronger, but later game their units are a little bit weaker. But their early game is not the best. They can't pump units out as fast as some other civilizations. So Stanley's probably talking with his teammates, probably trying to figure out what he's going to use into Japan. A really hard rush civilization can do well versus Japan. Other options, you could focus on taking map control. If Japan doesn't have any shrines out or very few shrines, it's pretty difficult to do well in a situation like that. Yeah. Yeah, this map, there's some water. I believe it's only 4 whales, lots of fish. There's some yaks on the map, 3 trade posts, or it can be 3 trade posts like this, or it can be 2 behind each player's bases, if you will. The hunts are pretty fair. There's not a whole lot of mines, but there's enough. There's basically 3 mines on your side and then 2 in the middle that are very contestable. Yeah. It's a pretty open map. You've got cliff here though, and you've got the sea over here. So it's not the the it's not super easy to wall like it is Fraser River, or usually the walling you see on Dhaka, or even Kamchatka. But it's kind of closed off on both sides. If you're trying to notice where your opponents are coming in for a raid, you can do so with just a few buildings or units strategically placed. Stanley Winston asked for just a break. I am going to take a quick break myself, just a little bit of water. I'll be back in about 30 seconds. Pleasure casting for you guys. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. And I am back. Stanley Winston asked for 2 minutes, so we're going to give it to him. This is in a long 5-game series like this, it is more than reasonable to ask for a couple minutes to strategize, or even just take a little bit of a break, a little bit of a breather. If I was 4 games down in a series like this, I would want to take a little bit of a breather, try to reset myself, try to get into the last game and approach it fresh. It's a good way to approach it. Reading some of the chat here. Yeah, I don't know why Stanley played the way he did, but in the last game, perhaps he wasn't expecting an FF, but an FF is fairly common from Spain, and it was not approached very well, I think, by Stanley with his game plan at least. Looking at it. Right. Lose 20 coyotes without killing the factories, and then killing the falconets, and then training 5 falconets and taking both of them down. Gustav Romer, we have Stanley Winston down 0-4. So Forjustice has won 4 games, 4-0. Yeah. We have Forjustice, who has picked in locked in Japan for the last game, and Stanley Winston has not chosen a civilization yet. We should get going very shortly. Yeah. Anything you guys are curious about in chat? Manchuria. I kind of went over it. We can look at the natives. We have Shaolin or Zen. I believe it can. One of them can spawn. Shaolin will spawn or Zen will spawn. I don't believe they spawn at the same time. I could be wrong on that. Looks like Stanley Winston has chosen Dutch. So Dutch into Japan. This is an interesting matchup. Dutch has the ability to boom pretty well. On AP, you can have 5 banks. Their banks also are buffed a little bit with a bank card in age 4, I believe. And yeah, they're pretty strong. And in team games, 1v1, they're not picked that often. That's partly why they're buffed for EP. We'll take a look at the overlays and get it swapped. Stanley is on Team NWC, and Forjustice is on Team Nilla Ninjas. We have Forjustice representing Nilla Ninjas pretty well here. He's done a really good job. Looking at the map, it is very fair. This map is one of the fairest when it comes to map generations. We'll take a look at the hunts. There's not, let's see, 1, 2, 3 hunts basically, a 4th over here. And on this side we have 1, 2, 3, a 4th over here. The mines are really good. We do have the trade route spawning across the map like this. 1 trade route with 3 TPs. We'll give Forjustice 4 wins there on the game score. Yeah, it's looking good. We do have Forjustice, who opted to build his cherry orchards pretty quickly instead of scouting more with one of them. He may have scouted a little bit, but he could have definitely scouted a lot more. On the other hand, we have Stanley Winston as Dutch, has not gathered any coin. Looks like he's going to be gathering only food and aging on his aging up with just gathering food. On the other hand, we have Forjustice as Japan building a trade post. That's interesting. We saw earlier both players in game number 1, I believe it was, both went Japan, and they both went Portuguese consulate first instead of trade posts. We have, you see, on the other hand, we have 8 yaks from Stanley Winston and no yaks from Forjustice. That's very interesting. That can definitely play a big part. Looking at some of the treasures on the map, interesting that the yaks behind Forjustice's base. If he had scouted with his cherry orchard, he probably would have picked up a couple of those. As Japan, livestock is really nice. It allows you to be able to build more shrines wherever you want with hunts on them, basically. Again, Forjustice built or sent fishing boats as expected. It's pretty much your best first shipment on a map like this where there's a little bit of water. Even if there's a lot of water, it's really good. Looking at it, Forjustice just started aging up. He's aging with the Teshugo Shrine as expected. Stanley Winston, I'm sure, is just gathering. Yeah, he's gathering the food and wood to build a bank. His treasure. Well, we can take a look at the treasures that have been picked up. Forjustice got 85 wood treasure. He additionally got, so Forjustice picked up 30 coin, 85 wood, 65 coin, and 65 coin. On the other hand, Stanley Winston has got 55 coin, 40 wood, 75 food, 30 XP, and 20 coin. So pretty even. I value the 85 wood a lot though. That's a big one. Forjustice can now make turtle soup with 40 food. We can take a look at the decks real quick. Pretty standard. 4 villagers is not all that common in Dutch decks. Pretty normal deck from there. On the other hand, we have Forjustice. He has more C cards than you usually see. Pun intended. He's got 2 Foons, but that's his only straight up military or warship card. He also has improved warships and European cannons, but I wouldn't expect to be using those almost ever, especially when your opponent has not picked a C deck. Looking at it, we have a market up as the second building in Age 2 for Dutch. Japan is going for a second trade post. Oh, he went with the Torii Gates. My bad, I thought that was Teshugo Shrine. So the Torii Gates. Torii Gates gives 1.5 times XP for all units killed, trained, and buildings taken down. That's it. It doesn't give you more XP from Trickle or from your trade route or anything like that. I'm not entirely sure he's aware of that, because certainly if it gave you more XP from your trade routes, that would be very strong to build it with 3 trade posts on a trade route. He has opted for a little bit more of a boom with the 3 trade posts. Not so much working on the shrines. That's an interesting play. That's not something you see every day from Japan. He's also shipped 3 fishing boats twice. If he had a consulate out, he could use the port's consulate to get 3 additional fishing boats. It's looking like he's trying to get this treasure. A free stable would be nice. He should be able to get it. It's really close though, actually. We'll see how it goes. Dutch envoy just sitting over here. We have 3 banks from Stanley Winston and a stable. On the other side, here, let me go to Shipments. I'm sorry, guys. Units in queue. We have 4 Naginata. Naginata cost 100 food, 100 coin. They're pretty decent though. It's pretty comparable in cost compared to Hussar. Hussar 120 food, 80 coin. Naginata 100 food, 100 coin. Very close. Same amount of resources, just a bit more food for the Hussar and a bit more coin for the Naginata. It looks like Stanley Winston is trying to put pressure, and the Naginata pull back. Yeah, it's a good choice there. With the Samurai, though, he may be able to make it work. We'll see. And the Explorer picking up at least. That's 67 XP. As you can see, extra XP from the Torii Gates. That's he's gotten extra XP from getting the 4 Naginatas out and the killed Explorer. That's it though currently. Looking at the rest of it, the trade post still being sieged, and the pikes coming out. Okay, the Samurai is pretty hurt. I'm not sure that going for the treasure and getting your Samurai that hurt for an extra stable when you already have one is necessarily worth it, but we'll see. We still have 3 banks from Stanley Winston. He could go a 4th and a 5th without any cards if he chooses to. He's not doing so quite yet. Naginata coming in to raid. The buildings are not positioned so that the oh my. So Stanley Winston spent 100 coin to give 100 coin to Forjustice to get his Explorer back. Forjustice saw that, went forward and picked off the Explorer before it went much of anywhere. So that's just a free 100 coin to Forjustice there. And we have the Cav Naginata moving up here. Let's see if this trade post should go down really soon. What else to look at? For the shipments coming in, Japan has actually gone pretty heavy on economy with the shipments. He's aging now to age 3. He sent 3 fishing boats into 3 fishing boats into 600 wood, 4 villagers, 600 coin, 4 villagers. So he's definitely not focusing on a heavy push or getting tons of military units out. On the other hand, Stanley Winston got a 5-pop of Hussar and shipped 8 pikes, so he's not focusing too heavily on military, but he also is not focusing on economy as much as Japan is. It's weird saying that without having many shrines out as Japan. It's got a few. He's got 6 shrines out, but yeah, it looks like he's aging up with the Golden Pavilion. I think it would have been better for him to age up with the Toshugo Shrine. Yeah, he's not going heavy into shrines. Perhaps it suits his build order a little bit better. I definitely could be wrong, but the Toshugo Shrine gives you 20 population and gives you more of an income and boosts all of your shrines that you currently have. So the Torii Gates has not given him a whole lot in the way of XP, not very much at all. So I think the Toshugo Shrine would have done more at this point so far, at least. He also does get a free military building with that, so he got a stable out. So that's worth noting. Lots of Naginata out. 7 pikemen still around for Stanley Winston. He has a bunch of Reuter out now. That's a good choice versus this much Naginata. He still only has 3 banks. That's okay. If you look at the economy, it's still better for Japan because he's focused it quite a bit more. Fight going on, and the Naginatas are in on the... Whoa. With that much Reuter, I'm not sure I would have chosen to sack those Hussars and just run away. Naginata are very good, no doubt, but they are... interesting. Reuter obviously countered them pretty well. That was an interesting choice. I guess he felt that he wouldn't have won that fight. Perhaps he was right. He was also closer to the enemy. I don't know if he's aware that there's 2 stables. If he had been paying really close attention, he would have been paying attention to the treasure, and when the first batch of Naginata came out, it would be fair to surmise that there is indeed 2 stables. And being that close to the enemy, he could have Forjustice could have popped units onto him, and it could have gone pretty bad for Stanley Winston there. He has more Reuter out. Reuter are very interesting. They are 30 food, 75 coin, very cheap. They're 1 population. They also only have 16 base attack, 3 times versus cavalry, 168 HP. If we compare that to Naginata, 360 HP, 30% range resist, 35 hand attack. Somewhat comparable, but the Reuter are definitely ranged cavalry and are meant to counter the Naginata. Due to them being so cheap, some people like them quite a bit. They are the weakest ranged cavalry short of the Chinese Keshik, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So I can understand wanting to pull back there. He only has so many skirms. He doesn't see all the Yumi that Forjustice has. That's a lot of Yumi. With only 5... Let's see. I can't count. 10. With 10 Hussar, he could clean this up. Looking at the economy, it's still fairly close. The military unit population is bigger from Forjustice. Naginata are pretty good though. And he backs off. We have the cavalry combat that came in for Stanley Winston. That's a good choice. It buffs all your Reuters and your Hussar. The skirmishers, that's not a whole lot. Now that he's seen what the opponent has, though, he can try to counter it. At the same time, Forjustice, looking at his deck, he doesn't have 2 flaming arrows. That is interesting. That's really interesting. I suppose he realizes that Dutch doesn't have a 2 Falconet shipment, and he realizes it's not as necessary. Because flaming arrows are a little bit weaker than falconets versus most units, but also are better than falconets versus cannons. So I guess he's opted not to have 2 flaming arrows. That's kind of a staple card. It's on almost every single Japanese deck out there. Looking at it, still more economy for Justice. He's got a few on whales now. He's still he has 150 he has 15 shrines out on the map. He's still trying to keep up with it, or keep the trade posts up, so that makes a good amount of difference actually. We'll be able to look at the end after this game and see that Forjustice had a significant shipment advantage. You can already see here he's got 2 shipments up currently. On Stanley Winston, it's more like 2.5. Yeah. And that is not enough skirmishers to engage with the Yumi, but that's a lot of cav. It's 106 military unit population versus 96. I like the army composition from Stanley Winston more. This could be a really big fight. This could definitely turn out in favor of Stanley Winston. The Naginata are intended to be a little bit more anti-infantry units, and they're not quite as good versus, or relatively as good versus other units. So yeah, definitely a cleanup from Stanley Winston. If he can kill all these Yumis and push hard, it could be really good for him. The economy is still pretty close. Forjustice definitely has the lead, but this is a huge military advantage at this point. You have the Reuter just going in, trying to get on top, blocking the Hussar at the same time, though. Skirmishers lagging behind a little bit. Yeah, that's huge. This might even be the deciding factor for this game. That was really big. 2 cherry orchards coming in from Japan because this cherry orchard's just about gone. And we have Stanley Winston moving up here. If he was paying a lot of attention, he would know that there's tons of shrines, and a lot of the shrines don't have hunts, though. That's interesting. I don't think I'd be putting shrines... I don't know. It's just interesting. Looking at the battle over here, it looks like Forjustice is trying to just get some of his villagers back. A lot of his villagers are working, but he just has very little military, 14 military population. Pop does come out from the home city with 5 Naginata. He's trying to do everything he can right now. The Minutemen finally come out. It's kind of looking a little bit iffy, but I mean, Dutch has the bigger army here. He should be able to pull it back. There's the defender's advantage for Forjustice. We'll see what happens. He needs a bit more cav in here, honestly. And it is coming in. Yeah, this should be a complete rout by Stanley. It's looking like he's going to take game number 5. Yabusami are interesting. They're a very unique dragoon type unit, ranged cavalry type unit. And the cav going in, are they going to go on the? They are going to go on the villagers. Yeah, this is probably GG right here. Lots of villagers going down. Yeah, GG. Well played. That gives Stanley Winston the game up, or not game up. Gives him a game. So, game 5, he was down 4-0. He comes in, resets himself, picks up a win. At least he ended on a strong note. That was pretty good. All right, we can take a quick take a quick look at the stats, that is about as close as you ever see in Combat XP. Looking at some of the other stats, we can look at the villager population. Strongly in favor of Forjustice. He used 4 shipments to get ahead in that. Resources gathered very close. Getting the banks up for Stanley Winston. Let's see, military unit population, very, very close until that fight. And the Naginata are really good versus skirmisher type units, and relatively not quite so good versus other units because of that. So we have Dutch pulling away with that win. He did end up putting a 4th bank out, but really well played by him. This concludes game number 5 of Stanley Winston and the New World Challengers versus Forjustice and the Nilla Ninjas. Thanks so much for watching, guys. This is Jill that has been casting, and I appreciate it. Excellent games. You guys are awesome. I'll catch you guys later.